episode of the BioHub. Today's guest is someone who's seen biotech from both sides of the table, first as an investor and now as a builder. I'm joined by Punit Dhillon, CEO of Skye Bioscience, where he's leading one of the most exciting stories in metabolic health. Punit started Skye as employee number one and has since built into a clinical stage company with one first-in-class program and backing from major life science investors like 5am and Versant. With a background in finance and business development and a career that includes partnerships with Merck, Genentech, BMS and Pfizer, he brings a unique and deeply strategic lens to biotech leadership. In this episode, we'll dig into his mindset and what it takes to build from the ground up, the wave of innovation in obesity, and how Skye is carving out its lane in one of the most competitive markets in biotech. It's a pleasure to have you, Punit.
Max, that's a fantastic introduction. Thanks. Give me warm and fuzzies.
Yeah, we were just talking before. It's quite nice to look back as well at the span of your career. I mean, maybe you start on that front because you've had a pretty incredible journey from investor to operator. Can you just walk us through that story and how your experiences now shape the way you lead in biotech?
Yeah, maybe send me that intro so I can read it myself every morning. So it gives me motivation in this present market. But yeah, no, it's been, obviously, thank you. It's been it's really a pleasure to be on your podcast, and I am just continue to be super excited about what's happening in the overall biotech pharma space. I've had that unique opportunity to have started on the investment side and kind of learn through what drives biotech, the value associated with biotech in terms of data being a major currency, but not only data, the people and the technology and timing. There's just so much of this coordination that's part of it. Had the pleasure of kind of working on several different technologies and building companies. I've focused more on the IND to clinical and clinical proof of concept stages. Early on in my career, I was involved in a phase 3 program as well as a phase 4 program that had a marketing launch. But what I realized, kind of going from this investor lens to operator lens, is that it's really realized I really am motivated by building and not just backing you back different things, but when you're involved hands-on, you're kind of having the opportunity to lead from the inside, which is really cool. You get that opportunity as an investor, depending on the type of investor you are. I started off working for a venture fund, so there is definitely more of an active component that comes along with that type of relationship. But it's either way, whatever way you look at it, working in the industry, working as an investor, both kind of share similar mindsets. They're focused on capital discipline in many different ways, execution, tempo. Investor, you're expecting management teams to hit it and make sure that you hit the objectives. Internally, you're expecting your team to hit it and hit that objective and inflection points. All of that stems from just having really strong clarity around what we're trying to do. So as an investor, you're looking for backing ideas with conviction just as much as from an operating standpoint. So I appreciate the broad experience. That's what I love about this business is that it's very dynamic, and I think my takeaway from that is it just brings this opportunity to really have a focus on the tempo of what's required and adjusting to that tempo. So I'm lucky that I've been able to get good people that we have around any one of those situations, and especially at Skye, there's just a fantastic team and board of directors, and it pushes that tempo to hit those objectives, and that's really cool. And it's funny, even coming to the word tempo is an interesting thing for me, because I was bring it back to these running analogies or cycling analogies, but yeah, it's like it's all related, and I'm really glad that we're focused on something that's moving really with purpose and clarity with our objectives.
I think it's pretty special what you guys are doing, and we'll come to that like later in the talk. I think what's quite interesting at the moment is you've come from the investment side, and then you've also seen what makes a company investable, right? So
Yeah.
how has that influenced the way you've built and positioned Skye, or has it?
Yeah, look, I think looking at Skye like through a capital allocator lens, and from my standpoint in terms of like building this organization from the ground up, we're focused on programs that are real. They're demonstrating some target in terms of validating a clinical need or unmet need. We're operating in a way that has continued to show that remaining lean and agile is a business model that can work. You don't have to necessarily build it and then they will come type of mindset. You can be very disciplined about how that growth happens, and that's something that we take seriously in terms of being very thoughtful about our capital deployment. We have a very kind of clear external communication as well. I mean, obesity's gotten a lot of traction over the last few years, and we made a bet going into this therapeutic space. I mean, it was already happening. There was a lot of mainstream media in early 2023 that was capturing the trend, and I remember seeing an Economist article that had a auto injector Wegovy or Ozempic pen on it, and it was like, I think the headline was like solving for everything or something like that, and those are kind of important opportunities to kind of reflect on what's going on and how fast is this space heading. But a lot of people weren't necessarily there yet, and that's the lens you have on the industry side. You're talking to many different investors. You're seeing what's clicking, what is the unmet need. We're spending a lot of time with physicians. Like this last quarter, we spent time speaking with 60 different key opinion leaders in the obesity space and physicians on the front line, prescribing physicians, endocrinologists. So you're getting a lot of different data points. All that to say, like we're really trying to figure out like how to make that impact, right? How I want to work with a team, and I want to work on drug development so that you can help people, right? You've heard that. There's like, that's a common thing that a lot of people say, right? And I think it's a very noble intention, but that statement also oversimplifies like what's actually taking place in terms of how you're going to actually make an impact in healthcare. So just because you have that vision of like trying to help a lot of people, there's just so much that goes into that. It's like getting the getting the right drug, getting the right patients in a way that actually changes the outcomes is so important. That's the end goal. And to do that, you have to kind of zoom in well before even like, you see kind of these trends. Like you have to start asking, like, what's the problem that we're actually solving? Like precisely, because that headline I was referring to, like on The Economist, again, it's like it's a way to captivate an audience and stuff like that. But there's like a lot of detail of like what are we actually trying to aim for? And for us, we're not just asking like what is the unmet need. We're asking clinically, we're asking like systematically, economically, socially, like what are the things that we're trying to solve? And here is a therapeutic area that has such a broad context. Like before we started, remember I was just saying, like there's a kind of a broad ecosystem here. You have drug intervention that's supposed to help towards weight loss, which is obviously doing its thing. But we all know that is a one component of a much broader problem. It's diet, exercise, socioeconomic factors. There's a lot that goes into that. So to me, all of that kind of boils down to really crafting a really strong product profile, and that is crystal clear that it's technically feasible, and that it's truly strategically necessary. And the foresight that we have to have with all the expertise around us is like, whatever we're doing today is relevant by the time you get approved, right? So you have to kind of anticipate that access that you're going to try to provide, anticipate how that mechanism is going to be relevant. And then, we study precedent, we study reimbursement, we study, real world practice and what's actually happening. And then we try to bring that, through the regulatory environment. So yeah, coming back to your question, like, that's freaking just a phenomenal opportunity when you think about like what privilege we have to be able to do that as a capital allocator. And remember, we're operating in an industry that has the most strangest business model in the world, where you kind of go negative, like quote unquote negative, in terms of investing before you see the return on that investment. It's not like, the iPhone or something like that, where the cycle is, they have their own regulatory and QA cycles, but it's a much more compressed cycle in terms of seeing the fruits of their efforts before, versus drug development, which takes decades.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? Because that's actually not a viewpoint that I've necessarily thought of, that, what you're doing is it's still going to be relevant by the time you're approved into market.
Yeah.
But also, I was having a conversation not too long ago with someone, and they were talking about how there's too many companies that are going to set out to maybe make a couple of percentage difference in the population of that, that disease area.
Yeah.
When you're spending millions of dollars of investors' money, like, the aim should be to go out and aim big, right? Like to make a difference to the people that are suffering from whatever you're trying to solve.
Yeah, like it's funny that if we talk about like kind of like what I think we were talking about what makes the company kind of investable, like from that standpoint, and how it's a very common question, right? Like that we have to think, and I don't want to get too philosophical, but coming from the different lenses, like from either speaking to investors or being from the investment side, and then about working on the industry side, it's like you're trying to calculate the probability, right? And investors are constantly trying to figure that out. Like, what are the odds of the science, the team, the strategy, all of that converging into a real product? And when you look at like Skye, we look at that equation through two lenses. You're looking at it from a capital allocation standpoint, and then also, in terms of what we have to build. So you kind of need both, right? And from the allocator side, like, I have to always think about, and the team, we have to always think about, like, does this asset justify the burn? And the builder kind of asks, like, can this drug actually reach the patients and physicians in a way that actually matters? Is it going to move the needle? And that means we don't just think about like kind of getting the drug approved, but we're actually working like backwards from that moment where the physician is sitting across the table from the patient, and the patient has choices. And in obesity, like, that's the issue. Like, what I wrestle sometimes with is like you just made the comment about, it is a crowded space. Everyone's kind of going for their piece of the pie. So this is almost like a Coke versus Pepsi type of situation, right? Where you go to a restaurant and sometimes they don't have your favorite brand. I'm a Coke preference person, so every time I go to a establishment that serves Pepsi, I'm like, there's a little voice in my head that says, that I always thought Coke is a more superior product than Pepsi. But anyways, but it's kind of like, that's the crazy thing that we're dealing with in this current environment, you have like a lot of mechanisms that are a lot of products that are the same mechanism, and that area has been kind of well established. The GLP-1 incretin space is working. It's making a difference. Many patients are giving that a try, and it's working. They're looking for acute weight loss, but there's also this aspect that doesn't work for everybody. And then when we are thinking about it from drug development standpoint, is like, so why nimacimab? If you already have this dilemma of GLP-1, X versus GLP-1 Y, and patients are trying to make a choice between, I'm referring to like if they have to choose between Mounjaro or Wegovy or Zepbound, why nimacimab? They already have the Coke versus Pepsi issue. Well, the answer to that now is that we are selling the idea that our product has enough value, to look at that long term. Like we're looking at safety. Safety is a huge factor in terms of a chronic therapy that has to be trusted over the long term. You have to be looking at it from a differentiated mechanism, which this is doing, is trying to drive science or the change in the biology or the physiology from a different aspect. And those are the things that we're talking about from a target product profile that make it very enticing in terms of what really makes this company investable, in terms of, and that's what to me is really exciting in terms of when an investor like looks at Skye, they're not just asking if the science works, they're asking if we've kind of built all that machinery, clinical, CMC, commercial, regulatory, that can make this idea come all the way to the market. So I'm really like fascinated by that calculus that's always ongoing in terms of that interaction that we have with getting a drug approved and pushing that forward versus like the inputs that we're getting from the external stakeholders. That's investors, obviously, but also just in terms of the data points that go into that, which is the science and clinical side. Yeah,
it is interesting because like investors do go with trends as well, right? So you're like talking about that Pepsi versus Coke, but normally like they will all go down that avenue if it's popular. So yeah, it's interesting. It is. I'm interested about like when you were starting with Skye as well. What was it like building the company from the ground up?
So I am, it's been great. I mean, and it hasn't been a straight, like linear path for sure. Like there's been so many, let's call it real, like there's been a lot of ups and downs in that process. And I'm really proud to be working with a team that I've experienced with, or new people that I've met over the last 4 years that I've really helped get this company to where it is. So it's been, like any, best analogy goes in terms of building a house. It's literally been brick by brick, where it's always been science first. And I think, a lot of people always make this claim about betting on the jockey. And then you kind of, everything else works. I don't think it's that simple. I agree with that mindset of betting on a team. But you can't like have a jockey be successful if they have a horse that has an injury. Like so the science always has to be a critical piece. So to me, sometimes like, look, science has to be the first thing, then team is like really close as a second, and you need those two to work, and then this culture and capital that's important. And for Skye, it hasn't been a straight shot. Like I took a bet. I was an investor in this company and a board member, and then I ended up taking a very active operating role during the pandemic. And I, was convinced of the science of a certain molecule, and looked at that market opportunity again from the TPP lens, and did the research and speaking to like several ophthalmologists and other industry experts around that path, and we were developing a drug in the glaucoma space. But during that research, because I wasn't experienced in ophthalmology, and but like that's our job, right? Is to learn the market, understand what's the opportunity. And in that particular situation, we quickly kind of came to the realization that glaucoma is an interesting market, and just generally ophthalmology broadly in terms of drug development is an interesting market because there's so many. It's a very limited market, and in glaucoma specifically, there was this interesting situation where the first line treatment was heavily reimbursed, and it was dominated by these prostaglandin analogs. So, if you really wanted to be successful as a target addressable market, what's referred to as a TAM, that TAM has to kind of beat that frontline therapy if you are thinking like a blockbuster drug, right? If investors are usually interested in betting on things that have a high multiple. And we quickly came to the conclusion that that TAM is significantly compressed in the second line setting because it's so dominated by the prostaglandin analogs, and there's just so many credits and the way that the reimbursement works in that particular market that is a tough nut to crack. And that's why there's so many prostaglandin analogs that are also in the pipeline that are driving that. And but we were still we were still very focused on executing against that. We ended up betting on a mechanism that we thought was differentiated. And when it didn't meet our target product profile, we had to make a tough call. It was like, well, do we try to science our way through this to try to beat the first line, or are we basically setting ourselves up for failure? Because even if you get this drug approved through the process, you're not going to have much of a market to actually address, or even if patients are very motivated to use it, is that going to be the risk reward that is going to be necessary, that investors are willing to take to invest in something like that, because it costs money to develop. And that's what the tough choice that we had. And I went down that path, and at the same time, the rec started recognizing where that market was, and the team collectively spoke about, like, well, we have a certain amount of experience with that particular mechanism. We were looking at CB1 agonism, so it's activating the receptor that we're targeting now in weight loss, but in the eye. And so we had a fair amount of experience around the science and the biology of the receptor, and we're like, well, hold on a second. There's actually a much larger therapeutic area, and there's a possibility of a franchise that we can think about beyond just trying to solve for the biology around the eye. What if we just think about this from the inhibition standpoint? Because inhibition actually has been validated, and there was previously drugs approved. So we started looking in that area, and we came across a private company that was backed by 5AM, and we basically approached 5AM with that idea. It's like, look, we're a CB1 company. We're focused on developing an agonist for glaucoma. We're going forward on a proof of concept study. We don't know if it's going to work and it's going to hit our TPP, but we really like the biology around CB1. We think that there's possibility here of taking this CB1 inhibitor that you guys have been developing in this company called Bird Rock. And what about if we put this all under one company? And this way, Skye has another shot on goal in case the glaucoma product doesn't work out. So, that's us putting on our entrepreneurial hat to pull those things together. And like I said, science comes first, right? And then it's the team and everything. So we unfortunately, didn't get the answer that we wanted in glaucoma. And thankfully, we were betting forward on moving forward with the nimacimab asset, and it paid off. It was a week. Sometimes things work for many other reasons, like there's luck involved, and the luck part of this came about because Novo ended up acquiring another CB1 inhibitor the same week that we were announcing our acquisition of Bird Rock, and we bought ours for 20 million, and they bought theirs for 1.1 billion. And it turns out, about a year later, our bet was right, that like we had visibility of that one too, because we looked across the whole landscape for CB1 inhibitors, and we felt that there was a safety concern around small molecule still. And in September of 2024, proved out that that Novo still has to deal with that safety concern, and we have a more peripherally restricted one, which we can get into the science of it. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, I know you only asked about like what that experience was like, or how is it like an employee one. Yeah, employee one is like one aspect of it. I thankfully have an employee, I think whatever, employee 17, and we have a cool thing in the company where we have these jerseys called Skye Athletics. So every employee that joins the company has a number on their back, and I love that. That's their employee number. Like, well, when they started in the organization, and it's just an internal thing. So I like the culture that the team has, and that's been the biggest takeaway, is that when you're doing something as whatever crazy, in terms of making these big choices, you need a team that's also capable of being resilient through that. And this team has been awesome. It's the best team I've ever worked with.
I think that's such a good idea. It's like the numbers, and I think that's really good. It's like when you play football or soccer for your national team, you get a number in terms of you are the 1000th and second player to play for that national team. It's the same kind of thing. I really like that. Yeah, it's cool. It's really
cool. And then we would retire numbers too. So if somebody that just was exceptional, unfortunately, they moved on, so we end up just retiring that number. So it's good. It's kind of like a sport.
So good. Yeah, I love that. That's so good. I mean, we've gone through a whole lot there, and I think it's pretty interesting, your story, right? Like you mentioned the word luck, which I always think is interesting in this industry, and I suppose there's an element of that, but also like you knew you just had to cover bases, right? And you wanted more shots and goals, so in some ways it wasn't luck. You were just doing the right thing.
Yeah, like I personally, like, I come at this from a unique angle where I'm not a scientist, but I've been in the business for 20 years, and I feel like sometimes like you become a specialist. And so I was one point working in vaccines, so then you become a specialist in tropical diseases, and then worked in oncology, and then become a specialist in solid tumors, and then you work in ophthalmology, and you become a specialist in glaucoma, and now we're in obesity. So like this, at the end of the day, I'm not a practicing physician or anything, but I have the responsibility, and the team has a responsibility to understand the science, understand the market, kind of pull all of that together, and then bring the additional expertise we need to move that forward. And that's what we've done here, is that we are really, personally, I've been really fascinated with this therapeutic area for two reasons. One, I've been a health nut like all my life. I was a competitive athlete. I continue to be pretty competitive, or whatever, active in as an adult, and now in my 40s. I believe there is a constant kind of need for us as we're getting older to continue to focus on movement, and there's more to that, to mindfulness and movement and time that people need to do that. But let's be real, like there's a component that we're taking a lot of that for granted in Western society versus the rest of the world. Like there's a lot of people that don't have that same privilege to be able to access all of that time or resources or whatever that's what. So what our job here is to kind of push as hard as we can to bring that forward. And what fascinated me about the obesity space and just the metabolic health side is that there's this opportunity to go direct to patient, right? There's truly direct to patient innovation that is capable in this area. my prediction is in 3 years, all of us are going to be able to, go onto an app. You can choose from, any one of 400 or 500 doctors to be your personal health coach. You can choose the anti-obesity medication that you want. You can get prescribed, and not only the medicine, you'll get prescribed exercise, you'll get prescribed, another technology like a CGM or anything like that, and it'll be one ecosystem. It's like what the technology companies have already done really well. Like the Apple, you wear an Apple Watch? There you go. So how many times do we look at our watch and like, okay, I got to close my rings? It's just become part of the behavioral component that they've done really well. And I think that the biotechs and pharmas are finally starting to recognize how that can come together. And that's the foresight that our team's been thinking about, is like, okay, well, obviously we're focused on moving forward nimacimab and getting that across the line and getting it approved. But we've already, been thinking about how does that ecosystem come together? What does that look like in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, in terms of what is a patient's experience going to be like? And weight loss and improving metabolic health and improving your quality of life isn't just one thing. It's not just losing weight. It's lifestyle, it's diet, it's exercise, it's other factors, it's mindfulness. There's a lot that goes into that. So I think that's going to be the potential. Now, what's the structural kind of tailwinds that keep us really motivated and working towards this? It's really simple. I always like to keep it really simple. There's an unlimited demand here in terms of what the structural unmet need is. Obesity and overweight affects billions globally. It's an epidemic. It's not a rare disease market. It's literally mass consumer awareness, self-diagnosis, motivation, whatever you want to call it, type of issue. And supply and access is like basically what you want to do. So that's number one. Number two is that the patient turnover in the current anti-obesity landscape is a significant opportunity. I mean, we have firsthand data that's even higher than this, but I would say that somewhere between 25 to 50% of patients on incretin therapies alone will stop treatment within a year. Okay, so due to cost, due to tolerability, due to supply issues, due to diminishing returns, due to wanting to go on maintenance, whatever. We have a ton of reasons where we can explain why that turnover creates a new opportunity. And in the end, the third most important thing, remember, this is a chronic therapy that you want to have. So what do you need to have success in chronic therapy? You need to obviously show efficacy. So let's make sure that we're getting a drug approved based on efficacy. But the long game is focused on safety, right? You need to get patients to trust a drug, and if they're going to take it over a long period of time. And the best proxy for this is you look at the hypertension drugs, right? Most people just take these like cholesterol improving drugs, and they don't know if it's working or not. They're just like betting and hedging on the fact that they're not going to get a heart attack in the future, or it's going to affect their health. But they're kind of taking it like it's like just I have to take it kind of thing. So here in weight loss, this is where patients will only stay on a chronic therapy if they feel that it's safe. And in obesity, where many are otherwise like unhealthy, this bar is like even higher, right? So nimacimab promise really lies on delivering a meaningful efficacy and without compromising safety. And most importantly, this class, because it's been a kind of a cloud that's followed the class, is this neuropsychiatric tolerability. And that's, we went into that full eyes wide open when we acquired this drug. We're like, this is the problem that this whole class is going to have. This is why we're picking a large molecule antibody, because it's going to stay out of the brain. So it's those three things like that really are motivating that, that this product is really situated to become a direct patient opportunity. And that's what I'm so excited about. And that's why I feel like it was like 20 years in the making, where I was like, oh, everything's just come together. Like then we go back to this line about, oh, you want to help the most amount of patients. And, this is why we're in biotech, is because we want to have I feel like we're in a therapeutic area where that's actually going to be possible.
I feel like that whole explanation just put the whole of our conversation together as well. Like, it just gave purpose, spoke about your mission. Yeah, I love that. And it even went back to when you were talking about when you're an investor and working backwards, like you see the whole vision.
Yeah.
It's cool.
It's awesome. And it's we're having so much fun doing it. Like we were talking this last week about as a company, as a young company, we also get the privilege of doing great things, and we have so much good engagement with so many different stakeholders. We have our great cap table with investors like 5am and Versant, and so those people and those teams are such a good energy. You when you have great energy around you, you're just always motivated to do a lot more. So we have those kind of fun, engaging conversations. Then we have the same with the KOLs and doctors that we're working with, and there's clinical sites, and then there's the internal ecosystem. So we were talking about well, in the fall, we're whatever, if we do a strategy session or something where we bring different people together, maybe we'll try something different. We'll do athletes week or athletes weekend, or bring the fitness element to it, and that's where we have a team that's very committed to their personal growth and personal health, and see okay, well, these changes, the things that we're doing, are part of the energy we want to bring externally as well. So there's this really important feed forward loop that comes alongside of that, because you only successful what you put into things, right? If you really want to be successful of getting something across, obviously it's you gotta have all the things that we talked about, but one has to really care deeply about putting that work into things, and that hard work then pays the dividend. So that hard work, I just feel it comes in many different shapes and sizes, right? Or efforts. So that's what it is. I just, when you're working with a team that's also super committed the same way, or just shows up in that way, it just forces everybody. And I know it sounds kind of a little too nebulous, but I really mean it in terms of I get a lot of energy from that hard work, I guess.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah.
I mean, it certainly seems like you're building something really special, culture-wise, environment-wise, but also you're looking to achieve great things. I mean, it's awesome. Yeah, so thanks for walking us through it 100%.
Yeah. Let's keep building the team. I mean, so that's why I love speaking to you. So we have a long way to go. The company's still pretty small, and I'm really the best when I basically hire people to challenge me. So I always I think you've heard this before. People need to hire people that are better than them. That's you will always hear that from me. It's I always try to find people that know more than we do, and have the ability to really teach everybody else, and they challenge you, and they care deeply, they speak up. So that's the thing, is what my job comes down to, and the other leadership team's job is just to really have clarity, make sure that we give everybody the autonomy that they need, and make sure that they're aligned in terms of what our goals are, and then let them do their job. They're the experts. They can do the job and focus on the mission. And I think what you're working on is really fascinating, because you're on the other end of trying to help these companies kind of bring that together. How are you going to bring that type of clarity and retain the culture, retain the success that companies trying to achieve with the other dynamics that come. And I'll tell you, that's really difficult. I've been through different organizations. We've had, I've been a part of multiple executive teams, and it's a tough thing where you have the different, dynamics, ego sometimes, and other things that come in the way of trying to be in alignment in order to drive towards that mission. So yeah, it's a constant thing. I always feel like we need to go through so many different assessments. Like if there's not a single assessment that you can have that answer.
Yeah, it's hard. It's so hard. I mean, we even with our own growth, we even go through those arguments how do we know, and you can go so much off track record. And even going back to your last point where you want to hire people who are better than you and challenge you and make you better. Mark Zuckerberg says a similar thing, doesn't he? Where he says you should only hire people that you would also want to work for. And I think that's a great philosophy. If you can distill that in every manager's mindset, in every single hire, and then every manager said they would work for each of their employees, then you're onto a winning business, right? So that something like that always stays in my mind. Yeah,
and plus then the personal capacity increases, because then you get to continue to think. There's just so many facets of any business. So being able to have the energy to spend on other elements to create that value is takes a lot of effort. So definitely. I subscribe to that, and I think we should continue to pressure test and encourage people to have the confidence to that, because sometimes it is a tough one to crack, because people have different experiences getting to that point, and leadership positions that often not everybody's gone through that same experience to get to that. So they're coming at it from a different lens, or they may not have been given the autonomy for those decisions. But increasing the capacity, hiring people that are better than you, only helps you overall improve, and the overall team improves. So I get it.
Yeah. I think we could talk about this all day, right?
Yeah.
I've got one more question for you as well, which is a question we ask all our guests. And it's, if you could have dinner with any scientist or innovator, past or present, who would it be and why?
Oh, it's a tough one. Any scientist, any innovator, past or present, and why? That's a really tough question. There's so many people that come to mind. Well, there's an entrepreneurial side. I'm super fascinated by it, because there's people that I really respected and admire. And then there's the science side of it. It's why did we do this? Why would
give me two? Give me one each side if you prefer.
Okay, well, I would say Steve Jobs on the entrepreneurial side, because I think that it's not for the obvious reasons that just Steve Jobs comes to mind, that it is one of the first people that came to mind. But I think Steve Jobs did a really good job of simplifying things and looking at things from a different lens and from a product side. And in terms of what I'm kind of contending with every day in the direct to patient area, it's very similar to the direct to consumer area. And here's not only a entrepreneurial genius, but a marketing genius in terms of how he was able to work with a team to try to bring fascinating new ideas to life, right? And to ask these questions in a way, or to market them in a way that make them super engaging. I remember seeing a graph one time about, here's all the current dominant, quote unquote phones, and here's where the iPhone is completely separate. This is when the iPhone was introduced, and it really epitomized this whole concept of think differently without even saying it, right? He didn't have to say it. He just said, here's where everybody else is. This is what the iPhone's going to solve. And I was like, oh, okay. And maybe there was a lot of skeptics because that was just launched, but he was so good at positioning and framing things. And I think that's the part of, the game, in terms of trying to get the Coke versus Pepsi thing is actually a funny analogy, which is probably true, and that we have to think, though. I'll have to workshop that one later. So yeah, entrepreneurial, Steve Jobs. On the science side, there's there's no, I have a tough time naming one scientist, but I will say that one of the most fascinating conversations I always have, and I always try to strive for with really strong scientists and clinical trialists, is what they're thinking from how to solve a patient, solve a patient problem. And I believe some of the most brilliant people that I've spoken with, unfortunately, one example is a doctor that I worked with in the past and who's unfortunately passed, but he was so great at bringing together what the clinical strategy would look like in order to really solve for that problem. So it's like just the brain power and calculus that's involved to actually navigate a product through like that really narrow edge to get it approved. Because that's the crazy thing about this industry. Like, there's thousands of companies, right? And there's many different pipelines and many different drugs. Remember, there's only a few of them actually get across the finish line. So this is this is why biotech is a really tough business. So it's about that, like, bringing that together to actually solve for that. And those scientists that can identify that early on, it's like, let's just say before things get into the clinic, and it's like, hey, this is the specific path that we're going to follow. These are the scientific questions we're going to answer. This is the regulatory questions we're going to answer. This is how it's going to fit in the industry, and like bring all that together. That's those some of the people that have been able to help craft those strategies have been really effective. And I, again, can name several in our industry that actually have been really good at that and got drugs approved. Like, for instance, getting CAR T approved, right? Like that was a huge accomplishment. Getting even the checkpoint inhibitors approved, and then opening up those floodgates for cancer care. Getting GLP-1 approved. GLP-1 is also an example of a drug that was different, focused on a different mechanism before they discovered the peptide analog. So I think that there's a lot of good examples. I can't, unfortunately, name a specific scientist because I would have to, like, I feel like I'm gonna.
No, it's good. I think
exercise others.
I understand as well. Like, it's a super interesting question. It takes a lot of thought. But thanks for.
I'm actually curious who you would choose, though.
Yeah, I've not been asked that question back.
See, you're putting you on the spot.
It's a hard one to look past for me. Like, I think, like, as a visionary, he was an innovator more than like a CEO, right? Like, and that's all he wanted to concentrate on as a company. Like, how do we innovate? How do we get ahead of the market? Like, you said it right. Like, iPhone was up here, and you had other phones like here. I remember watching, I can't remember what it was called, but the BlackBerry film. Yeah. And as the iPhone came out, that was almost like the cause of their downfall, and they were like, couldn't understand why you would get rid of a keypad and have no keypad on the phone. And then they were super late to the party, weren't we, when they put out their phone with no keypad? Yeah. But he just saw it, like, he did, like, clear as day. He got ahead on the iPod, but even before then, I think Steve Jobs is a really hard one to look past, to be honest. I mean, I even watched the film the other day, and all of that. But then again, I just admire so many entrepreneurs and innovators. Like, you look at a guy like Elon Musk, for example, and I'm not going to touch on his politics, but like,
put the politics aside. But the other side has been,
like he just put all his eggs in. Like he started SpaceX, right? Yeah. And the idea actually came before what how do we turn this into a business? Yeah. And I thought that mindset was really interesting. He just saw, I want to do space, so I'm going to do space, and then we'll think about how the business aspect comes after it. And that's how he then did Tesla and then the Boring Company. And I find that really
every single one of these things, I agree. Like, his capacity has just been uncomparable, like, in terms of those things. Like, and he doesn't accept failure. Like, like, even how many times did SpaceX fail on its launch before he's like, okay, we're going to try it again, and we're going to try it again. And like, And that's true resilience. And he really put everything on the line to make that accomplish. So I totally, I kind of agree with you.
Yeah.
And then even like in terms of the Tesla success story and then building all that ecosystem around it, it's been really great. And those are the types of visionaries that continue to push the envelope for everybody else, right? Because
there's so many, right? And if you go to the past, like you're talking people like Churchill for me, like the relentless mindset aspects. I'd just love to get into his brain, and you know, the amount of points in the wall where we were just, you know, it looked like we were dead and buried, and everyone was advising him, like with Dunkirk, basically to surrender. And he just didn't. And I just find that mindset fascinating. So I'd love to pick his brain. And then there's people like Einstein, and you could go on.
Yeah, Einstein would be an interesting one. Okay, well,
I've had the answer Einstein before, and the reason was really interesting because a lot of people answer this just go, who would I want to pick the brain of? But it was actually Judy Chow who said Einstein, and she said I like Einstein because we could have some seriously interesting conversations, but also we're having dinner and he looks like a super fun guy to be around, so we'd have a great time as well as that. So she answered that really literally, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, you're right. I would think that would be pretty interesting. Well, like I really appreciate the thought provoking there. I'm going to reflect on that one and maybe
let me know if your answer changed. But it's a pleasure to have you on, Punit.
Yeah, likewise. It was really great speaking with you, Max, and I'd love to do it anytime. And let's try to get together during Bio.
100%. Everyone, please like and subscribe to the BioHub, and thanks again, Punit.
Take care. Thanks.